Hey everyone, welcome to the Religious Gamers, where you don't have to be a gamer or even a religious gamer. You could be a couch potato or a helicopter. I'm Christian, also known as Afa, and with
I'm
me
a
I have
helicopter. Oh, I'm
apparently
Tater. I'm sorry.
it's all good. With me I have my co-host Trace, also known as Tater slash Helicopter. We are so excited to be here because we want to start bridging the gap between Catholic and Protestant, theist and atheist, gamer and non gamer, and anyone else that feels some kind of disconnect with the world. So please come forward with theological questions, feedback, suggestions, and even respectful counter arguments to some of the things that we bring up on the show.
So there are a few things we'd like to say right off the bat. One is that we are not trying to convert each other. We are simply just sitting down to have nice conversations about our faiths, and we want to share that with y'all.
That's what you
We
think.
hope, yeah, we hope that through these calm and mature talks that we can help everybody see that just because you don't agree with someone doesn't mean you have to get mad at them. We're going to disagree a lot with some of the topics we have tonight and in the future.
Yep.
Nothing we say is going to hurt the other's feelings or upset them. We've talked about this, we've had discussions, we know. Also, our opinions don't reflect on everybody in our realm, or not realm, but in our church.
Yeah. And that being said, because of the nature of this show, we encourage everyone to send in feedback, suggest topics, leave positive comments in the chat, stuff like that. We are not naive, though. We know that there are people who don't like what we're going to be doing and who are just trolls. Um, so we won't tolerate anyone who is unnecessarily rude to us or any other viewers. However, we do promise that we will look at every comment with the same open minded approach and seriously consider what you all have to say. We're here to have an open dialogue with each other and also you.
And we are really excited to start this, and we will deliver episodes once a week, but we can't make this our full-time job. We both have families that we need to look after, and so we ask for your patience. If it takes us some time to get back with your questions, we're probably researching and studying so we can get you the best answer. We both work full-time jobs to make ends meet. If you'd like to see us make this a full-time job or just feel called to support us, we will have a link in the description where you can donate to help us get off our feet. Now that we've said all that, it's time to start the episode. Today, we're just going to be talking about what goes on at each other's normal Sunday service.
So, for Catholics, there are many different Catholic rites. The one that is most popular here in the U.S. is called Novus Ordo. That's Latin for new order. Um, and they got started in the 60s, in 1960s, with kind of corresponding to the Second Vatican Council, which went on. They were actually, the Novus Ordo got started separately from that. There's nothing in Vatican II that actually talks about Novus Ordo. It's a bunch of liturgical people decided to get together, and this is just a little bit of history. But a bunch of liturgical people decided that they wanted to basically kind of rebel a little bit, and so Novus Ordo is a little bit of a it's an interesting one. It's a something for another episode in the future. But it's been slowly kind of brought back into the actual traditions of the church, and it's been done so much everywhere that it's basically become its own rite. At a typical Novus Ordo Mass, we have a regular order of events, beginning with the procession. The priest will come in from the front or the back of the church and proceed towards the altar with a large book called a Roman Missal. Now, there are other missals or liturgical books used for various reasons, but the main one that you will see at any given Mass will be a big red book, which is obviously the Roman Missal. Usually there is a hymn being played at this time, but it's not required, nor is it always there. After the procession, we have a few prayers, and then the liturgy of the word will begin, where we have 3 readings selected for that day for every Mass and throughout the world. One reading from the Old Testament, one from the New, that is not a gospel reading, and then the final one will be from one of the 4 gospels. The priest gives a homily that is supposed to be based on the gospel, but he can also talk about things that he feels his congregation really needs to hear. And then we begin our Eucharistic rites, which involve us praying the Our Father, telling God that we are not worthy, that he should come under our roofs, meaning our bodies, and then saying that with faith and hopefulness that it is ultimately his will if he does, and that we accept it if he but says the word. Finally, the priest gives us the final blessing, says any announcement there might be, and exits similar to his entrance. This is just a very basic example of how our masses generally go. There are other details and things that go on that I did not go into just because I'm just trying to lay the groundwork here for most masses. So yeah, that's what goes on at a typical American Catholic Mass.
Yeah, and that's cool. I've never been to one, so I've always wondered how that went. Is that a thing? We've done work in a bunch of Catholic churches before. Do they do Mass every day, or is it something only Sundays, or?
It depends. I do believe that they're supposed to have a daily Mass. Most Catholic churches will. But yeah, they have they're at different times. Some of them are. I heard one priest refer to it as a fisherman's Mass, where it's like 5 in the morning or 6 in the morning or 7 or something.
Going out before they hit the lake.
Yep. Well, it's in reference to the sailing age, where everybody was fishing in boats for the most part, and they were sailors and stuff, and they had to get out there early on the ocean or on the lake or whatever to provide for their families, for their livelihood and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And they couldn't get to a normal Mass any other time of the day, so they had to go early in the morning before their ship left.
Yeah, I got you.
But then some masses have like a Mass every day at 5. I think that's typically going to be college places, college churches.
Yeah.
I used to work at a church in North Dakota, St. Paul's Newman Center up there, and we had I think it was a 6 o'clock daily Mass, and it was really nice to go. It was really nice to have that there.
I got you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I guess a normal, typical Sunday service. We like Sunday mornings, you go to church, and we have a Sunday school before, and that would just be like really anybody in the church who feels led to teach a Sunday school class can, and it would just be like a very simple Bible study where you'd have, you could have 5 people or you could have 20 people in one, and it would just be everybody can talk and communicate, and everybody can put in their thoughts and their inputs. So that's a good thing to be able to just, hang out and be able to actually talk. You're not just getting taught, you're actually able to ask questions if you need to or something like that. And it's just very open, like this right here. It's just open conversation type thing.
Speaking of, I do have a question, if you don't mind.
Okay. Yeah.
So for this Sunday school that you have before your service, you said just anybody, if they feel called, Stu, can get up there. They don't have to have like any kind of trying to think of the word, but like I don't want to say qualification because it sounds so rude, but they don't have to have like anything like that, I guess.
Well, I don't want to say just anybody. Like, if you're just a random person off the street and nobody knows you, you're not just going to be able to walk in and teach a Sunday school class. But
Gotcha.
if you're a member of the church and an active member, I've never tried to teach a Sunday school class, so I don't know what all it entails. If you have to, maybe
Hmm.
meet with somebody, or maybe there's a class or something. I'm not 100% sure, but they don't have to be like an ordained preacher or
Okay.
anything like that.
Gotcha. Gotcha.
So, but yeah, that's
And
because that.
I'm sorry.
No, no, you're fine. They're just mostly leading a conversation
Okay.
about, you know, whatever their topic in the Bible is that day. They're just kind of leading the conversation
Okay.
around it. It's not like, yes, they're teaching too, but I don't know, it's hard to explain now that
No.
I.
No, no, it's all good. It makes sense to me. It's more like
Yeah.
a discussion. Um,
Yes.
okay. So
And
it's not
that.
like it's not like somebody teaching a bunch of kids. Typically, it's
No,
for
no, no.
everybody.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah,
You'll
so
have
that's why I
and
asked that first question
yeah.
about qualification. I'm
You
like, they don't need it like a certification that they're not,
Oh
gonna
no,
do
if you're
anything to those
dealing
kids.
with if you're dealing with kids in any type of anything, you
Yeah.
have to be yeah.
Yeah,
Um
well, and again, I'm not trying to be rude. I know that like it's ridiculous now how many steps you have to go through in order to do anything like
anything.
with children. And,
Yeah.
and I don't mean like ridiculous as in it's a bad thing now. It's just I think it's ridiculous that the situation has had to evolve in
That
such a way.
it's had to come to this,
Yeah,
yeah.
exactly. And so,
Yeah.
I mean, yeah. So we'll digress from that because
Yeah.
that's not topic. But
Okay, so in that saying though, there are different like age groups. Like this would be
hmm
split up into like you could have a college Sunday school group where college people go, or you could have a newly married Sunday school group where
okay,
it's newly married and they'd be
that's kind of cool.
like helping you understand a biblical marriage. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
it could be age groups. Obviously, if you're dealing with kids, you're going to have background checks
Yep.
and all these things done.
Yeah. We
But
we
yeah,
have
that
to go
would,
through like a whole rigorous class as well.
yeah.
I've tried to do a couple things, and I've been involved in scouting and other things I had to go through, and I had to do like a whole course. It was like
Yeah.
another college course. It was crazy. But go
So,
ahead.
but
I'm sorry.
well, golly, I'm excited now because that's just the Sunday school. That's the easy part.
Yeah.
Um, but the Sunday school would basically go, you'd get there, you'd go find your room with your
hmm
age group or your, I don't know if you'd call it genre or whatever, if you want to go to like a college or a newlywed or whatever. You'd go in, you'd
hmm
meet everybody would hang out, talk for a few minutes, then they would pray, they would start the not Bible study, the Sunday school.
hmm
Then at the end of it, they would pray again, and everybody could go down into the main church to where we could start the actual service.
Okay.
A normal Sunday, like let's just say you didn't go to Sunday school, you'd pull up in the parking lot, you'd go to walk in, and you'd have your foyer where the whole worship team would be standing there, the preacher would be standing there. There's serve teams that welcome people and show them where they need to go if it's a nursery or whatever.
Okay.
And so you'd walk in, you'd go find your seat, you'd sit down wherever you want to, and they would start with prayer, and then we go into worship time. It depends on what church you go to if you get like a traditional style with hymns and stuff like that. We talked about that last time, but
hmm
or like the one that we do is very modern drums and guitars and all that. So you'd go into worship time and they'd play probably two or three songs and then they would pray, and as they're praying, the worship team would come down, the preacher would go up, he
Okay.
would preach his message, and it's very biblical message, so it would be,
hmm
he'd spend time in the word studying on, it could be anything, and just however he ties it together would be, whether he wants to, like you said, it could be for a certain thing he's studying for himself or something he thinks that the congregation needs to hear or something like that. And then
Gotcha.
at the end, he would pray. We could Normally we would do like one more song of worship as like a as you're walking out type thing, but that would just be a normal Sunday service. And I'm sure, like you said, that's just laying the groundwork. That's not
Okay.
everything in detail, but yeah.
How long does a normal Sunday service last? Just the service, not the school, not the Sunday school.
Um, Hours that we go to is an hour, so we
Okay.
get probably three songs. You're looking at around 10 to 12 minutes for worship. The preacher will go for probably 30 minutes or so, and then you'll have time for other things if we
Okay.
do other things,
Gotcha.
but around an hour.
Okay. Cool. Cool. Um, well, for this segment, we have questions and responses that we have written down for each other, just to bring some organization to the show. A lot of it is deep material, and we want to be respectful of each other's views and the views of our religions. So we need notes like these to help us articulate those views. That being said, this is a more open discussion, so we will interrupt each other and ask each other spontaneous questions or make comments as well. So, Mr. Trace, I do have some questions for you about the Baptist service. I've never been to one, and so I wasn't like sure, like, what all I could ask. So I tried to like think of like, well, okay, what questions do I have? I know Catholics believe this. Well, okay, what do Baptists think about this? So, first one
Yeah.
is, do Baptists believe in the real presence of Jesus Christ?
Yes, we 100% believe in the presence of Christ. We believe, we're very biblical. So we go to things like Galatians 2:20. It says, "I am crucified with Christ, and it is no longer I who live, but it is Christ who lives in me, and the life which I now live in the flesh, I live in faith, the faith of the Son of God who loved me and gave himself up for me." So as a presence of Christ, yes, we believe that Christ is present in us.
Okay, okay, gotcha. Um, I did ask this earlier, but how long do preacher sermons usually last?
Oh, that's gonna be another one of those. It depends on what church you go to. Like I said
Gotcha.
earlier, the one that we go to right now, they're a very start on time, end on time type church because they
Okay.
want to make sure that people can get out if they have family time or whatever. So they want to make it as accommodable as possible.
Mm-hmm.
But you can go to some Southern Baptist churches that the preacher will go for an hour and a half, and you're just sitting back there going, "Oh my gosh, I'm ready to go eat lunch."
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
so really, it just depends.
It's funny. I've heard that about Baptist churches specifically, and I've heard the same about Catholic churches. I'm just like, a homily usually lasts for like 5 to 10 minutes, if that.
Yeah.
So, like, I'm typically very confused. But
Well, see, I've heard about the Catholic weddings. That's what I've
yeah,
heard.
I don't get that either. Haven't had an actual traditional Catholic wedding myself. You did mention this, and we did talk about it the one time,
Yeah.
but like, ours was like an hour. It felt longer because we wanted to do this too. It wasn't just
Yeah.
forced upon us, but we wanted to be as traditional as possible. So we knelt for the whole thing, and that was rough. But
Oh yeah.
yeah, so especially my poor wife, she was having a really really rough day our wedding day. um, I won't go into
I
details
think
on that. It's a little
I,
personal, but
I think that's just the normal thing
well, yeah.
because
um,
I feel that.
yeah. Um, okay, so what do you do if a preacher doesn't show up for a service? and I'll explain what Catholics do after you give your answer.
Okay. So, as far as if the preacher doesn't show up, I've never had it where he just like doesn't call, doesn't show up,
Mm-hmm.
nobody knows anything, and he's just not there.
So
Normally, he would.
so the
Normally,
yeah, go ahead. I'm
sorry,
sorry.
go ahead.
Well, I was just going to kind of explain like why this would happen. The reason why it happens sometimes in Catholic churches is that, like, say the parish priest who's usually there goes
Yeah.
on vacation, and the visiting priest, or excuse me, I'm so sorry, the visiting priest or whoever's supposed to do it has some kind of schedule conflict or emergency pop up, or unfortunately, some priests I know can be very forgetful, and they just forget because it's not their parish. It's all understandable.
Yeah.
So that's why I asked, because like I have seen it happen. So
Yeah. So for us, if the preacher doesn't show up, normally we have a youth pastor, being he is the pastor over the youth group. And youth group is, I mean, it's probably the same in a Catholic church,
yeah,
being, I think it's like 12 or 13 to 18.
something
So
like that. We have
the
multiple.
yeah, the youth pastor can get up there and he can preach to the whole church. Or we have what we call elders, which is, golly, I probably lost my verse for that. But an elder is somebody who is, you know, able to teach, and they can help make decisions and stuff for the church. It's hard to explain. I wish I remembered what verse that was that explained to elder, but
It's okay. I gotcha.
yeah, they can get up there and preach too.
Okay.
And like the church I'm at right now actually has two full-time preachers.
Oh, cool.
We have two campuses, so they go back and forth, and then yeah.
Oh, nice. That's pretty cool. Alrighty. And so what Catholics do, so typically it's not really like a hierarchy, and most Catholics wouldn't know to do this. But if the for whatever reason the priest doesn't show up, it's up to the deacon, who is they can be in the process of becoming priests, or they can be just permanent deacons, where they're married, have children, whatever. But usually there's supposed to be at least one deacon for every mass. Anyway, the deacon will get up and he'll say things. He'll. Sorry, I gotta back up a little bit here. So the deacon will go through the service, and he'll only go through certain parts, because he does not have the same authority that a Catholic priest would have. So he
Okay.
can't bless and make more Eucharist, more bread and wine for communion and stuff, like
Okay.
body and blood. He can't make more of that. He doesn't have that authority.
Okay.
Same would go for a layperson, because a layperson, if there's no deacon there, can also get up, and they can just kind of go through the very basic part of the mass, the liturgy of the word, stuff like that. And if there is some leftover sacred hosts from another mass, which there typically are in the tabernacle, he can give out those. But typically, if a priest isn't there, it's a very short. It's very much shorter. We're not going to give a homily. We're not going to worry about that, which is the same thing as a sermon for a preacher.
Yeah.
In case somebody didn't know, we're just going to do the very bare bones, because that's all we can do. So
Yeah. Well, that's pretty cool too, because there's deacons in the Baptist church too.
Oh, interesting. Okay,
Yeah. We have deacons and elders.
gotcha.
Or an elder could also be called an overseer.
And what is the deacon's position in the Baptist church? Because I know
They
for
are.
go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
Well, I know for
Go ahead.
Catholics, it's they're underneath priests. So a priest would, I guess, kind of translate into a preacher for you. Maybe deacon doesn't do that, but a deacon's like underneath, I guess, in the higher. I don't want to call it a hierarchy, but I think that's might be a good word for it. In the hierarchy of the
Yeah.
church, it's deacons are underneath priests.
Okay, yeah. A deacon in the Baptist church, he is a servant, and that sounds bad, but he serves
Uh-huh.
people. That's his main goal is to, make sure everybody's taken care of and do calls and checks and just he serves the people. To the Baptist, he doesn't necessarily have to be able to teach. He just has to have a servant's mentality.
Okay. Um, okay. So he's not like ordained or anything like that.
No, he's not an ordained preacher. No. He they have to go through, so the way that the deacons go in the Baptist church, you have to get nominated.
Mm-hmm.
So when somebody they say they're going to do deacon nominations and say you're a member of the church, we have qualifications straight from the Bible of these are the qualifications of a deacon. I'm sure y'all are the same way. And so I nominate one of my friends, Mike. He's a deacon in his church, but if I nominated Mike, he would then go through I don't want to say questioning, but like the actual like higher ups in the church being staff members and preachers and stuff like that go through
Okay.
questioning of them, and then he would go before the whole church. It would not on a Sunday morning, but they would call a meeting to say, hey, if you want to come ask the deacons questions, come on. He could go before the actual whole church, and then they'll hold a vote to see if he gets voted in or not.
Okay. Interesting. We have a different way of doing it, but maybe this is a topic for the future. So, what do you do if the preacher says something you disagree with about the faith?
Normally, like I said, we try to be as biblical as possible.
Mm-hmm.
So we get this out of Matthew 18:15 through 20, and it's talking about go and tell him his fault between you and him alone, and if he listens to you, you've gained a brother. If he does not listen, take one or two others along with you, that every charge may be established by the evidence of two or three witnesses.
That's a good
And if he
verse.
still refuses to listen to them, tell it to the church. And if he refuses to listen to even the church, let him be as a Gentile or a tax collector. So, not that we would kick him out of the church because he said something that I disagreed with, we'd kick him out of the church. But basically, you'd go to him in his office alone and say, hey, look, this is what you said. I didn't agree with it. And y'all could talk about,
Yeah.
he could say either, hey, this is why I said it. This is where I found it, or however that goes. And you could say, okay, well, this is how I took it, or this is what I thought you were saying, or even that's wrong because it says right here, this is what it is. You know what I mean?
Okay. Yeah, I got you. Um, do you believe that Christ is really physically present during communion or at the service at all?
Okay, so like we talked about in the first question,
Mm-hmm.
we believe that Christ is present with us all the time. As
Okay.
far as communion, this is probably one of the things we'll disagree with. We believe that communion for us is done. Hold on, let me find it. It's in 1 Corinthians 11 is where we get it from. We do communion to examine ourselves and our flaws and, just the ways that we have failed to walk in the right way and ways that we have failed God.
Mm-hmm.
So just to read this verse of where we get it from is 1 Corinthians 11:23 through 28. It says, "For I received from the Lord what I also delivered to you, that the Lord Jesus, on the night when he was betrayed, took bread, and when he had given thanks, he broke it and said, 'This is my body, which is for you. Do this in remembrance of me.' In the same way, he took the cup after supper, saying, 'This cup is the new covenant in my blood. Do this as often as you drink it in remembrance of me. For as often as you eat this bread and drink the cup, you proclaim the Lord's death until he comes. Whoever, therefore, eats the bread or drinks of the cup of the Lord in an unworthy manner, you will be guilty concerning the body and the blood of the Lord. Let a person examine himself then, and so eat of the bread and drink of the cup. So we do it in remembrance of him and in examining ourselves.
So it's more like a symbol.
I don't know if you could call it a symbol.
It's symbolic of the first
Yes.
Eucharistic meal.
And yes, it's done in remembrance and also, like I said, to examine
Mhm.
yourself and admit all the ways that you have failed.
So it's interesting to me. I think I'm going to disagree with you on the interpretation of that verse. Because
Yeah.
to me, it
And
sounds more like St. Paul is talking about receiving Eucharistic communion in the Catholic sense. And he's talking about doing that. He says something about doing it, unworthily. Don't do it unworthily. And to me, you have to go back and I'll talk about this when later on, but you have to go back to the Gospel of John, and I think the Gospel of John connects very heavily with that St. Paul verse. But that's just where I'm gonna disagree. I'm not trying to I don't know, start us on another conversation
oh
here
no,
entirely,
yeah.
but
And
I think I would really disagree with that.
yeah, and that's like we said, that's what we're gonna disagree.
Yeah,
We're gonna, we could talk about it. We can have calm and mature talks about things we disagree on,
exactly.
and it's not gonna hurt either one of our feelings.
Yep.
But yeah, that's where we get ours from.
Okay, I got you. Alrighty. Do Baptists have a set of laws that every Baptist should follow, similar to Catholics?
Uh, Actually, I have two answers for this one.
Okay.
I mean, I've said it a bunch. We are very,
I know I've changed
very
the wording on it
biblical.
too.
Oh, no, no. We're very biblical.
Mm-hmm.
So we try and now we fail every day,
Mm-hmm.
but we try and live how the Bible tells us to. And just it's not really a second answer, but where we get a lot of our, I would say, rules or type thing is
Okay.
Colossians 3:5. It says, "Put to death, therefore, what is earthly in you: sexual immorality, impurity, passion, evil desire, covetousness, which is idolatry. On account of these, the wrath of God is coming. And these you too once walked when you were living in them, but now you must put them all away in anger, wrath, malice, slander, and obscene talk from your mouth. Do
Yeah,
not
man.
lie to one another, seeing that you have put off the old self with its practices, and have put on the new self, which is being renewed in knowledge after the image of its creator. Here there is not Greek and Jew, circumcised and uncircumcised,
Mm-hmm.
barbarian and Scythian, slave, free, but Christ is all and in all."
I think it's
And then
Scythian,
Scythian, maybe, yeah. And
maybe.
then verse 12 is, "Put on then as God's chosen ones, holy and beloved, compassionate hearts, kindness, humility, meekness, and patience, bearing with one another, and if one has a complaint against another, forgiving each other, as the Lord has forgiven you, so you also must forgive. And above all these, put on love, which binds everything together in perfect harmony."
Now, see, this is an area where I'm gonna totally agree with you on. Like, I think, like, I love the verses you picked here, man. They're great. I think it's something that a lot of Christians I think have forgotten today. Um,
Yes.
and we'll talk about that a little bit later on because you do have a really good question about it, and I can't wait to answer it. So I'll
Well,
save it for
and
that.
just on this too, like I said, we fail every day.
Yep,
There's no question
we're all
about
sinners.
that.
That was my
So
favorite thing that you
yes,
said is that we fail every day. I was like, yeah,
yeah.
sing it, preach it.
We gonna get some amens up
We're
in here,
sinners.
huh?
Yeah, I almost
uh,
got excited and tried to. I didn't want to be disrespectful, so I didn't. But I was gonna try to imitate my Baptist brothers here.
as a funny on that, you saying we're all sinners.
Yeah.
When I was a kid, like I said in the previous episode, I grew up in a very Baptist home.
Mm-hmm.
So when I was a kid, I mean like probably 5 or 6, my older brother, my mom was talking to him about, what you need to do and how you need to, either way. She said, you need to understand that everyone is born a sinner and, Christ was a perfect man and either way.
Uh huh.
And Garrick said, so is Trace a sinner? And mom said, yes, Trace is a sinner. And I looked at my mom and I said, I'm not a sinner. You're a liar.
That's hilarious. That's such a little kid thing to say, though.
It is. So I still get harassed for that one a lot.
but but it's similar. I have just a little personal story here. I call her Mama. She's my Cajun grandma.
Okay.
So my Mama, she was so funny. She hated one of my favorite songs of all time, Amazing Grace. She hated that song specifically for the part that says, that saved a wretch like me. And she was like, I am no wretch. I had to laugh because I'm like, Mama, compared to, God and his love and Jesus, you kind of
Yeah.
are. But
Because our good works are nothing but filthy rags. I mean,
exactly. They're like our good works. None of them are close enough to be able to tie the sandals on Jesus's feet.
amen.
So, but we try, we try, and that's the important thing. Okay, so, this one's a little bit more of a personal question. Why does the Baptist faith appeal to you?
And this one is kind of another two-part answer.
Okay.
Obviously, like both of us have said, you were born into the Catholic, I was born into Baptist. So, being raised up in it and taught that your whole life, it was the first, whenever I got to be an adult and got to decide for myself where I wanted to go to church, it was my first choice because that's what I knew. Now that I'm in it a lot more and I'm, trying to seek answers and everything that I can, especially, I mean, just one thing as a compliment on us doing this. This has, I don't know about you, but this has given me so much study time and just trying to find answers to the questions and all that. But one of the big reasons as an adult is, like I've said, probably 7 times now, is we're very biblical. Like a lot of the things that we get are just straight out of the Bible. And so that's what kind of does it for me.
I gotcha.
Also, we are a very like relationship based church to where for us it's all about the relationship you have with Jesus. So like
Okay.
one thing we go to a lot would be Revelation 3:20. It's something that's quoted to you since you're a kid. Is behold, I stand at the door and knock. If anyone hears my voice and opens the door, I will come into him and eat with him and he with me. So just that simple relationship, and it's put so simply right there. Just
Mm-hmm.
he's standing at the door knocking. All you have to do is open the door. And that
Man.
that
Yeah.
yep.
Yep. It's a very simple thing to say, but it's quite another to do.
Oh yeah, for sure.
But yeah, man, I get it. Okay, so last question here, and this is probably my favorite, but not for the reason that you would think, just because I think it's a good measure of whether or not a person is open-minded or something. Anyway, so the question is, would you ever consider converting if enough evidence was brought to you that either another denomination was more right than yours, or another faith was more, I guess, um, right or factual or true than yours. True is probably a better word.
Yeah. And I can't say no because,
Mm-hmm.
like you said, I'm open-minded. If you just like closed your mind, made up your mind, said, no, this
Yeah.
is what I believe is the Baptist faith, 100%, to me, you're putting your faith in like a Baptist church.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Me, I get a lot of my answers from the Bible. It just so happens that a lot of the things that I seek out and I find and my interpretation of what I'm reading, the Baptists, or even, now there's a what you call a non-denominational, which is kind of, I don't want to say a mashup, but like,
Mm-hmm.
it's just, it doesn't have as much division
Yeah.
as like a normal Baptist. And so a non-denominational Baptist, it's pretty much the same thing. We have the same base beliefs.
Mm-hmm.
It's just very biblical. So it just lines up more with what I believe, and so that's why I can't say no, I wouldn't, but it would
Gotcha.
have to be a very,
It'd have to be a very convincing argument.
very convincing, and I would
Compelling.
have to be able to find it in scripture that is saying, what they're saying would have to line up with what I can find too. You know what I mean?
I get it. I get it. This is gonna be interesting for one of my answers. I'm looking forward to it. And I haven't been like making these comments to like, I don't know, undermine you or anything. I've just kind of been like, oh
Oh
man, I'm
no.
so excited to get to my answers for this because like,
Yeah.
I'm ready. I'm ready, man.
Well,
Um,
and I've been excited about this one too because last week we got into a few things, but
we did
last week was our first episode. We wanted to
our
just keep
nice
it very
episode.
simple and
Yeah.
yeah, just be nice, and it's Christmas, so let's just
Mm-hmm.
talk about foods and stuff like that. But I was really excited to be able to just dive deep into
Me
stuff
too.
like this.
Me too. And you know, we both mentioned that first episode that we're still learning about things, and the best way to learn is to teach. So,
Yeah.
man, this is great. I'm excited. I really am.
And
Uh,
also on that, just as a to put out for everybody, if there's a question that I ask and you need more time to answer, I
mm-hmm.
I don't want to put any rush on you or like you have to answer it right now.
Yeah.
You are more than welcome to say, "Hey, let me study on that and get back to you," because there may be some questions that you have for me or viewers have for me, like we say, that I could have to research and study for myself because I,
Yeah.
I don't I don't claim to know everything. I'm very far from it, but yeah.
Same
So
here. Same here. And there will be times where I say, Give me some time to research that."
yeah,
So that's I appreciate that. Because I don't know everything, and I would like, I you know, just a little bit of time to read from somebody who does know everything.
yeah,
But yeah, man, and vice versa. If you need to study more, please feel free to say it. I'm not in a rush here. Um, Maybe we could have like a section at the end of future episodes where we're like, okay, and this is our responses from previous episodes and stuff like that.
oh
And I
yeah,
think that
that
might
could
be
be a
cool.
good idea.
Yeah. Um.
Okay,
Alrighty, that's the end of my questions for
into
you, my
your,
friend.
you ready to get into yours yet, or should we
I
wait a few more
am.
minutes?
I am.
I can feel the tension. I know you're
It's here,
excited.
pretty much.
uh, so I guess we'll just jump straight into it.
Let's do it.
My first question is, what do Catholics believe communion does, or what purpose does it hold?
So, um, this one I had an interesting time trying to answer because, um, it's a very simple answer at its core.
Yeah.
And I want to say first of all, that Catholics believe in a very, very simple phrase here with profound meaning: the real presence of Christ in the Eucharist. And that means that we believe he is there in the Eucharist, that he is the Eucharist.
Okay.
Um, that being said, the Eucharist or communion is a coming together wherein Catholics believe that we receive the actual body and blood of Christ. The United States Conference of Bishops has an informative page on what Catholics believe about the Eucharist, but to paraphrase a little bit, through the Eucharist, Catholics receive spiritual nourishment and become united to the person of Christ. So that's what we think the Eucharist does for us.
Okay.
The purpose is so that we can, kind of like eating food, we need to be spiritually nourished, right? So that's what it's there for, is to nourish our spirit through Jesus.
Okay.
I'll have a link to that page down below, so viewers can learn more if they wish. We believe that this is not only necessary but required, as Christ himself commands us in the Bible. This is one of those verses I was talking about earlier. We can find in John chapter 6, verses 22 through 59. The two most relevant ones are verse 53 and verse 56, though.
Okay.
In these verses, Christ says, I'm going to paraphrase a little bit because I don't remember the actual words here.
Yeah.
But he says, "This is my body. This is my flesh. You have to eat of my flesh in order to find everlasting life, basically. So in order to go to heaven, you have to consume his flesh." There is a fun fact about this that I'm kind of hesitant to share because it's really interesting, but the original language that was written on this verse is really cool. It's one of my favorite fun facts. It's a little out there, but I think it's just cool as all get out. It's kind of Games of Thronesy. So
Yeah.
just a little bit of a warning here, but the original translation, the original way that this passage was written, should not be translated to "eat of my flesh." More accurately, it is "gnaw on my flesh." And I think this is really interesting because it just kind of paints this gruesome picture almost. Yeah. But it brings a depth to it, which is why I really like it. It brings a depth to it because he's telling us to gnaw on his flesh. How interesting and weird is that? Like, I mean, it's almost like he's talking down to us, like we're wild animals that can't do anything more than gnaw. But it's true. Like, we're, compared to him, we're wild animals. So it's interesting. So that's just like a little fun fact there.
Yeah.
More than anything, but it's very nicely translated to "eat of my flesh" instead.
So, just as a question on that one,
Yeah.
how do you, is there something you do to like make it turn into the physical body and blood?
Okay. So, the priest, what it is it's a process called transubstantiation. Okay.
Okay.
Wikipedia has a pretty cool article about this. I'll have to, not article, it has a definition. It's pretty short, and it's just like a definition of the word transubstantiation. So I'll have a link to that. This process is done by the priest. He blesses the hosts, and the host goes through transubstantiation, wherein the essence of the bread and the wine are replaced, and only the accidents remain. So it ceases to become bread and wine and becomes body and blood, and it only keeps the accidents of the bread and the wine. Accident is just a fancy philosophical term for appearance and just stuff that see, I'm trying to like think of how to word this now.
Yeah, no, you're fine.
So accident is just kind of a fancy philosophical term. It's kind of like the not the details. I'm trying to think of the word. I can't think of the word. This is why I write things down.
Well, that could be one thing that you could get back later on too, as well. That way.
Well, it's right there on the tip of my tongue. It's the problem.
Don't you hate when that happens?
I do, and it happens to me daily. Every second, it seems. I'm like, God dang it! I'm literate. When I write stuff down, it's perfect, but when I talk, it's like word vomit.
And it never fails. If somebody didn't ask you the question, you would have known immediately. But as soon as somebody asks you something, you're like, oh my gosh, you had to ask me that.
Yep. So, basically, they keep the stuff that make them look like, the bread and wine and taste like it and stuff like that. But the essence gets replaced, and they're no longer the bread and wine. They're the body and blood of Jesus.
Okay.
So transubstantiation, that's the answer.
Okay, gotcha. Okay, well, I mean, that's something I never knew or really, I never understood or anything like that. So that's one of the reasons why I'm excited to do this, is just to be able to talk about certain things that we do that we may never have known if this wasn't an option.
Yeah.
So my next question would be, what is your assurance of salvation?
Okay, so correct me if I'm wrong, but what I think you mean here is if Catholics believe that there is a such thing as an assurance of salvation, in the sense that once you accept Christ as your Lord and Savior, then it no longer matters if you sin or what state you die in. You're still saved by Christ. Catholics believe that while Christ did provide redemption for everyone, not just Christians, but Jews, Muslims, animists, atheists, how we obtain that redemption is entirely based on how we respond to it. In other words, you have to turn away from sin and the things of this world and die in a state of friendship with Christ, or friendship with God, otherwise known as a state of grace. Do this and you will go to heaven. But if you die in a state of mortal sin and rebellion against God, you will go to hell. Think of it like this. Say someone accepts Christ as his Lord and Savior in high school. When he goes to college, however, a series of tragic events happen to him, and he blames God for this. He turns away and wants nothing to do with his Savior anymore. He is then killed in a tragic accident and is not remorseful for how he lived his life, especially during his last moments on earth. Would you expect that person who spent his last moments sincerely hating God and openly rebelling against him by committing mortal sins to go to heaven? I wouldn't. And I think God, as much pain as it would cause him to lose his child like that, would respect that person's free will. And also, there's a punishment that has to be paid for these sins too. So
I got you.
So also just a little tidbit here. I feel I should say something about mortal sin, about committing mortal sin. Even if you don't hate God, it is still a rebellion against him. Just kind of like sneaking out when our parents told us not to is considered a rebellious teenager act. So to sum up, Catholics believe everyone receives salvation from Christ, dying on the cross for us, but you have to still work towards being holy. You can't just do things that are wrong or immoral and expect that God will save you. He has a right to revoke that gift that he is offering you if you choose to willfully deny him as a parent. There's an article from Catholic Answers about the assurance of salvation topic in the Catholic Church, and it's quite good. I actually read it almost all the way through. I skimmed through most of it, but it was really good. I started reading it after a certain point. And I don't see a whole lot of web articles with this, but it has what's called an imprimatur, which is another fancy Latin term that the Catholic Church uses to basically say, let it be printed. This basically means that it's free from doctrinal error. So, a Catholic can read it and take it as, okay, this is what the Catholic Church is trying to say.
Okay.
And I'll have a link to that article down below.
All right. So my next question is actually one that you asked me earlier, so it got me curious on how you would handle it. But what would you do if the priest says something you disagree with?
Well, it depends on what the priest said. Typically, I ask myself why I disagreed with it, if it's something that is actually against church teaching, or if it's something that I just don't want to hear. I'm a pretty proud person, and so there's a lot of times where I hear things that I don't want to hear. But
that's another one of those that everybody struggles with.
Yep. But I try to listen with an open mind at Mass as much as I can. One of my prayers that I say before Mass starts is, I just kind of like think about it, probably about 10 minutes before Mass. I like to get there about 15 minutes, and I like to just kind of, get the family settled as much as you can with two baby boys. And, I try to at least spend 5 minutes just kind of like saying, God, let your will be done. Please open my heart to the message that you have, my heart and my mind to the message that you have for me at this Mass. And so I try to just kind of set myself to be open to hear what God is trying to tell me at Mass. And he says all of that really through the priest. So if I don't hear something, or if I hear something I don't like, I got to examine why I don't like it first. If it is something that is actually against the church teaching, or it doesn't or if it's something that he said that there's no church teaching on at all, and I disagree with it, I do try to discern whether or not I should write a letter to the priest about it, or something like that. Like the verse that you had, I try to first go to the person I have a problem with, and then if that doesn't work, I go to his superior, or their superior. And privately. That's why it's in a letter form. If it's really bad though, and I just don't feel very comfortable at that church, I will start looking for another church or Mass to go to. This is usually something that's only happened at a place that I've just moved to for the first time.
And that's one thing too that I didn't say in mine. If like I quoted the verse over, bring the whole church to him, and if he still doesn't agree, if the church agrees with him, or if it's something that's just way out beyond wrong that we know, and he's not willing to accept it, yes, we can look for another church too.
Yep, exactly. Yep, I agree with that.
Okay, well that's good too. One thing we were talking about earlier, I think it was in your questions, you said that Catholics have a set of rules to follow, asking about if we did.
Mm-hmm.
So what are your rules to follow, and where do you get them from?
So, by rules, I if I said rules, I didn't really mean like rules. as in like, do this or you're not Catholic or you're cheating or something.
Yeah.
I meant like, Catholics have laws, like actual laws. They're called the Precepts of the Church, and they're stuff that we have to actually do. There's only 5 of them. You can find them on beginningcatholic.com. I'll have a link at the bottom. Basically, there's stuff like, you have to go to Mass once a week. You have to go to confession once a year. Just very, very simple stuff.
Okay.
You're not supposed to commit like a grave sin or anything like that. We get these just kind of from tradition.
Okay.
From how the very first Christians, the things that they said, things they talked about, the way they practiced, the way they practiced their faith. Everything that is a law in the church has a very specific tradition or reason behind it. So it's something that the Catholic Church is, 2,000 plus years old. You don't stay around very long. You don't stay around that long unless you have a set of laws or traditions.
Yeah, and that makes sense.
And so, excuse me here. I feel like I'm kind of like rambling at this point.
No, do you want to restart? We can't.
No.
Okay.
It's all good. Yeah, we get these from our traditions. We get these from that kind of stuff. Some of them, there are Bible verses that relate to them, stuff like that.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And, yeah.
I got you.
1 second.
Well,
Go ahead.
Okay.
Sorry.
No, you're fine. That's interesting, and I understand and see what you're saying there. Just another question that you asked that I thought could be an interesting, just kind of a curiosity thing. How long does your Mass usually last?
Well, this is going to be a more straightforward, simple answer, but it depends on the priest and the rite that you attend. But Novus Ordo can last about 45 minutes to an hour.
Okay. Probably depending on the priest. Is that about the same as me saying it depends on what Baptist church you go to?
Kind of, not really. So, like, there are some priests that Father Herb at my favorite church of all time. He's a good example of this. He liked to be in and out. He thought it was just the best way to encourage holiness. He was very practical. He went in, he performed all the traditions, all the whole Mass. He performed the liturgy and everything, and he did his homily. His homily was no longer than like 3 minutes. Actually, his homilies could get pretty long. It was really cool. He had he did series where he would do like a series on the Apostles' Creed or a series on the Apostles' Creed was my favorite, but he did a series on there's something else he did I think it was the 7 Deadly Sins he did a series on. It was really cool when he did those series. And his homilies were a decent length. But his way of expressing faith was he wanted to be respectful of everybody. He wanted to get them in, get them communion, and then get them out so that they could go out into the world and do good works and stuff like that. There are other priests who they think that you have to have a certain reverence about what you're doing. Because you can be quick and you can be reverent at the same time, but they believe that that you have to have a certain amount of reverence for what you're doing, and so they can take a little bit longer with how they do the liturgy. and stuff like
Yeah, I
that.
got
There are some long-winded priests for sure, um,
you.
and they can be interesting. There was one. He was such a nice guy, and funnily enough, he was at the same parish as Father Herb, my favorite parish, and I
You
loved
keep
him. He was
you
great.
keep saying parish. Does that mean the church?
Yes.
Okay.
So yeah. So Catholic churches, they have, it's kind of like a county but way smaller. So they have like a little area that if you live in that area, you're supposed to go to them for certain sacraments, certain things, like case in point, and we'll get back to the other stuff here in a second. But case in point, when I got married, um, I did not live in my favorite parish, which was Mater Dolorosa. I
Okay.
lived right next to St. Philip Neri. So in order to get married, I had to get permission from the priest at St. Philip Neri to marry the for Father Herb at Mater Dolorosa to marry me.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah. So it's kind of like a school district a little
Yeah,
bit
that's what I
more.
was about to say,
Yeah,
is a little bit like a school district. Yeah.
exactly. Um,
Gotcha.
and then going back to the long-winded priest, his name was Father Free. He was fantastic. I loved him. Very, very just like genuine. um, loved the faith. Loved Mother Mary. Very good priest. Irish, Catholic, the whole nine yards. But he had such a deep voice that it was actually kind of low in volume,
Yeah.
and so it was perfect to fall asleep to. And there were so many times where Catherine or I were like, "Oh man, I don't think I can stay awake." Especially after we had our eldest, like we were just so exhausted.
Yeah.
And we love Father Furry. We loved going to him because he just was such a great, genuine priest. But you couldn't understand him when he went up for a homily, and it was
Yeah.
just so low in volume and so deep that it was just like it was perfect to go to sleep to. Just perfect.
I got you. That's funny because we used to have a guy. He was actually the drummer at our old church,
Oh,
and it never failed. He would get up during worship. He would play the drums. He would come back, and man, as soon as that prayer was done and the preacher got up there, dude, you'd hear snoring. The rest of the service, he was out.
oh, that's hilarious.
But
Yeah, I fell asleep at mass once. I was real young. I was like 16, 17. I went on a mission trip. Not to anywhere in particular, like just like I think it was not was it? I think it was Pittsburgh. In the middle of the summer, it was a bunch of teens got together for an event called Catholic Heart Work Camp, HEART. And what happens is you go to a school because you're going to be doing charity around the area, and so you go to a school to spend the night because it's like a week-long thing.
Okay.
And the air conditioning at this school was broken.
Oh.
I mean, luckily we weren't there during the hottest, time of the day, but they had mass, and like it was the first day they had mass, and I'm tired from traveling. We had been on a bus for hours, and there's no any kind of air conditioning. It's all just hot, and it doesn't matter how lively everybody was because they were very energetic. It's the thing like let's be on fire for God and have fun, yay. They were very lively, but when I tell you I fell asleep after the procession and did not wake up until the communion, which is at the end of mass.
Oh no.
It was kind of funny. I hope I didn't snore. None of my friends bothered to wake me up, so I hope I was convincing at least.
You probably weren't too loud. Yeah. Just put your sunglasses down there.
Yeah.
Nobody will know.
Yeah. Well,
All
Catholics
right.
aren't
So,
supposed to wear like stuff like sunglasses or hats in. Like women can wear veils,
okay.
which is just kind of like it looks kind of like a crocheted doily or whatever. But it goes on top of their head.
I got you.
But we're not supposed to wear like hats or sunglasses in church.
I got you. See, we take our hats off for prayer.
Mm-hmm.
And like when we walk in, if we're doing worship or the service or whatever, we'll take our hats off too. But
Gotcha.
yeah. All right, so we're getting back into the hard hitters.
Alrighty. Let's do it.
All right. So where do you put your faith? Like, is it the Bible? Is it a priest? Is it, God himself? This is just a curiosity question of...
Sure. So, this I didn't do any research on. So if I say something that's, not officially in line with the church, I'm sorry, but I'm pretty sure this is correct. So Catholics will put our faith completely in God. We put our faith in the Trinity, which is God the Father, Jesus the Son, and then the Holy Spirit. We put our faith in them because they're God, right? They're the one true God.
Yeah.
But we give our obedience to the church because we believe that the church is God's body on earth. And we believe that God uses the church to tell us, give us messages and, have the not sure how to phrase this, kind of like help guide us in our walk as Christians.
Okay. Yeah.
I guess is what I'm trying to say. And then we frequently ask the saints for help in our struggles. So,
I got you.
Yeah, but so that being said, we don't believe that someone is saved by sola scriptura or scripture/faith alone, nor do we believe, although being human and admirers of heroes, sometimes we do put them on pedestals, but we do not believe that priests, bishop, cardinals, or saints are godlike or more than human in any way.
Okay, that was one thing I've always wondered too, just because movies obviously, I mean, they probably do a terrible job of describing anything, but that's the only information I've had so far.
Movies are cool, but they're pretty terrible when it comes to research. They're just like, oh man, let's just have this nun fight this demon, it'll be great.
Yeah,
do karate together. What?
Yeah. Oh my gosh, have you seen? This is probably not a great thing to talk about on this show, but
we'll see.
American Horror Story.
I have not.
Okay, there's a part in there, and I hope I'm not being offensive, and I'm not trying to be, but there's a part in there.
Karate, it's not accurate.
There's a part in one of those where one of the nuns gets possessed, and so I don't remember if it's the Pope or the priest. Either way, he comes in there and is trying to cast out the demon. And the nun, demon possessed, looks at him and just says, "She likes it here." And that has just been mine and Amber's joke for her multiple personalities since.
Oh, that's funny.
So anytime her multiple personalities come out, we just say, "She likes it here."
Well, so there are a couple things I should probably point out about the church. Not just any priest can cast out demons, so to speak. It takes a very special priest called an exorcist. And I would be really skeptical of a nun being possessed.
No, yeah, it's obviously it's a TV show. That's what I was saying. Yeah,
exactly. Like they don't get anything right, but yeah.
No,
so those would be the only things that I would point out.
That was more on the
nuns
funny
that I know. Yeah, the nuns that I know are like they're spiritual like special forces. They're fantastic. Like the nuns that I know, I have a couple sister-in-laws, and they're hilarious. I I love any time that my wife gets a letter from them, or like or on the phone, or anytime she tells me stories, really, because they're great. I love them so much, and I like nuns are just like these special forces, but they're not like above priests, I guess. So
Yeah.
I should point that out so that we're not getting confused at that. But they're just great. Yeah, there's some nuns that are fantastic.
Okay. Well, like I said, that was more just a funny. It wasn't
Yeah,
really
yeah, yeah. I got you. I just yeah, just wanted to
All
say.
right. Yeah. So, um, do Catholics believe that the Bible is God's full and true word?
So it's yes and no to this one. So on one hand, Catholics believe that the books in the Bible are inspired, and therefore are the true words of God to man through man. Um, they then contain many things that we should listen to and obey. However, since they are coming through human beings, they should not be considered as 100% infallible or accurate. People often, and even inspired people, insert their own impressions and ideas into their visions and dreams and discussions with the Lord, even if they aren't intending to. Not to mention that some parts of the Bible are uh, metaphorical and kind of flowery. Like the authors of the Old Testament frequently use language that described what they experienced and felt, but not what actually happened at the time. Um, so the book of Genesis is considered to be more fictional. Like it's, I'm trying to think of how to say this because I didn't write this down, but it's not that it's like fictional. It's just kind of like a I'm trying to think. Maybe I'll just edit this part out. But um, yeah. So like the authors of the Old Testament used language that described what they experienced and felt, not necessarily what actually happened. Like the story of Noah's Ark, we have scientific evidence that suggests that that was really just a regional flood rather than an entirely worldwide flood. But in the Bible, in the Old Testament, it's described completely as the entire world was flooded. And that author would have thought the entire world was flooded because they didn't have a way of getting out to see the rest of the world, like. So anyway, yeah, there's a lot of scientific evidence that says it was just a regional flood. And so Catholics are a little bit more we acknowledge that a miracle could have happened where God decided that he was going to make everything look like it was just a regional flood. To I guess the best argument for that would be to try and test people's faith in him and encourage them to have faith in him. But that would also kind of be a lie, and that would be kind of contradictory to a God that is all good. So the typical Catholic perspective on this is more that the Bible is a really good resource and is therefore a really, really good guide, but it has inaccuracies. It has dramatized stories that you can't take 100% literally. But it's also the best historical resource that we have for finding out what happened in the past. And so Catholics just kind of take it with a grain of salt and examine those books carefully.
Yeah. That would just be another one of the things we would probably disagree on.
I gotcha.
But once again, that's what we're here for. And
Yeah.
we're not, we ain't got to argue or nothing like that. We just, either way.
Yeah.
That'll be another episode.
That'll be another episode. Yep. We'll have one dedicated to the Bible. I think that'd be a good
Yeah,
episode.
yeah, for sure.
So, do you have any other questions for me?
I think that's gonna be it, really.
Okay. All right. So, I have one fun fact for this week, and that is that the Sabbath is not traditionally on Sunday. It was actually on Saturday in the Jewish tradition, especially during the time of Christ. So, Christ would have celebrated the Sabbath on a Saturday.
Okay, I think I had heard that before.
Yeah.
Something about one of the churches changed it for some. I can't remember the reasoning, but yeah, I've heard
Yeah.
that before.
It would have been the Catholic Church because it was changed a while ago before the Protestant Reformation for sure.
Okay, well, I actually have. I know I've quoted a lot of scripture tonight, but
It's all
I
good.
have one more I'd like to do, and it's one of my favorites. It's a very feel good, but it's the parable of the lost sheep. I'm sure everybody's heard it before, but it's Luke 15. It says, Now the tax collectors and sinners were all drawing near to him, and the Pharisees and the scribes grumbled, saying, This man receives sinners and eats with them. So he told them this parable. What man of you, having 100 sheep, if he has lost one of them, does not leave the 99 in the open country and go after the one that is lost until he finds it? When he has found it, he lays it on his shoulders, rejoicing, and when he comes home, he calls together his friends and his neighbors, saying to them, Rejoice with me, for I have found my sheep that was lost. Just so I tell you, there will be more joy in heaven over one sinner who repents than over 99 righteous persons who need no repentance.
That is such a beautiful verse. I love that verse so much.
And man, I know we had talked about like if you listen to more modern or traditional songs in the last episode, but
Yeah.
if you ever have a chance, there's a guy named Cory Asbury that wrote a song about this verse, and it's called Reckless Love, and that's what that song is going towards, is that verse right there, and it's a really good song.
I'll have to give it a listen to. But you know what? We'll have a link to it down below. Um, Alrighty, well, everybody, that's the show. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you enjoyed it, please hit the like, subscribe, and bell button so you never miss another episode. And if you feel that others would enjoy it, please share and get the message out. Next week, we're going to be talking about our salvation message / testimony.